Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Monachari Jamunatira Monachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balaba Givaradhari Gopi Jana Balaba Givaradhari Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Bonachari Jamunatira Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balaba Givaradhari Gopi Jana Balaba Givaradhari Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Bonachari Jamunatira Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Balaba Givaradhari Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunatira Bonachari Jamunatira Bonachari Gibaradhari Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasuranandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vonachari Yamunatira Vonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Vijana Balaba Gibaradhari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vonachari Yamunatira Vonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupada Paramansa Parivrajagacharya Stotara Sarashi Srimad Stvange Sesi Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Exactly like Pandu. Ojasa by prowess. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thereupon, when all the good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, the heir apparent of Pandu, who would be exactly like him in prowess, took birth. Responsibly, thereupon, when all the good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, their heir apparent, the heir apparent of Pandu, who could be exactly like him in prowess, took birth. Purport. Astronomical calculations of stellar influences upon a living being are not suppositions, but are factual, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Every living being is controlled by the laws of nature at every moment, just as a citizen is controlled by the influence of the state. The state laws are grossly observed, but the laws of material nature, being subtle to our gross understanding, cannot be grossly expressed. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 3.9, every action of life produces another reaction, which is binding upon us. And only those who are acting on behalf of Yagya, Vishnu, are not bound by reactions. Our actions are judged by the higher authorities, the agents of the Lord, and thus we are awarded bodies according to our activities. The law of nature is so subtle that every part of our body is influenced by the respective stars, and a living being obtains his working body to fulfill his terms of imprisonment by the manipulation of such astronomical influence. A man's destiny is therefore ascertained by the birth-time constellation of stars, and a factual horoscope is made by a learned astrologer. It is a great science, and misuse of a science does not make it useless. Maharaj Pariksit, or even the personality of Godhead appear in certain constellations of good stars, and thus the influence is exerted upon the body, and thus born at an auspicious moment. The most auspicious constellation of stars takes place during the appearance of the Lord in this material world, and it is specifically called Jayanti, a word not to be abused for any other purposes. Maharaj Pariksit was not only a great Kshatriya emperor, but also a great devotee of the Lord. Thus he cannot take his birth at any inauspicious moment. As a proper place and time is selected to receive a respectable personage, so also to receive such a personality as Maharaj Parikshit, who was especially cared for by the Supreme Lord. A suitable moment is chosen when all good stars assembled together to exert their influence upon the king. Thus he took his birth just to be known as the great hero of Srimad Bhagavatam. This suitable arrangement of astral influences is never a creation of man's will, but is the arrangement of the superior management of the agency of the Supreme Lord. Of course, the arrangement is made according to the good or bad deeds of the living being. Herein lies the importance of pious acts performed by the living being. Only by pious acts can one be allowed to get good wealth, good education, and beautiful features. The samskaras of the school of Sanatana Dharma, man's eternal engagement, are highly suitable for creating an atmosphere for taking advantage of good stellar influences. And therefore, Govardhana samskara, or the first sealing purificatory process prescribed by the higher sages, is the beginning of all pious acts to receive a good, pious, and intelligent class of men in human society. There will be peace and prosperity in the world due to good and sane population only. There is hell and disturbance only because of the unwanted, insane population addicted to sex indulgence. Verse again, Tatta sarva ganodarke sanukula grahodaye jagye vamshadharabhandor bhuya pandur ivo jasa. Thereupon, when all the good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, the heir apparent of Pandu, who would be exactly like him in prowess, took birth. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaivam narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat nastaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utama shlokir bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Prabhupada speaks at some length in this purport about the influence of astrological configurations. Unfortunately, there's a lot of hucksterism and pseudo-astrologers abounding in today's world. I had some experience that in London, a so-called expert astrologer was predicting what would happen in the life of a particular devotee. Those things never came to pass, which is an indication that there are many charlatans practicing the art of astrology. But Prabhupada says in this purport that it's actually a great science. A great science is something that can't be practiced by anyone, but it can easily be copied. One of the great poets once said that immature poets imitate, great poets steal. So everyone is trying to be a great poet or a great scientist. Not everyone, but many people are trying to be great by practicing astrology. There used to be in a newspaper that where I grew up in Oregon, signs of the zodiac, starting with Aries and going through it. And people would read them conscientiously, thinking that they would accurately predict what would happen to them on that particular day because they were born under a certain star. So anyway, it is a very great science, but again, one has to be very careful. Prabhupada himself didn't put a lot of importance on it. I understand that one of the inauspicious days is a Thursday, and that people shouldn't travel on that particular day. But he didn't observe that. He traveled constantly, although he respected that aphorism by putting his shoes outside of the house. So he sort of respected it, but didn't observe it very minutely. And then Prabhupada explains at some length how we are being monitored by higher authorities. Everything is being observed very carefully. And he used the example once of a person who works in an office. There's a so-called service record, quote unquote, in which everything that is done is observed. Everything good is observed, and everything bad is also observed. So at a certain time, a person either can get a promotion or even get a deletion if it's found that he has been not performing well or even cheating the company. Sometimes great sages are honored as we recite, as we sing every morning, just as good as the Supreme Lord. When I was about to become a devotee, someone told me about initiation, and I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. Initiation sounds pretty interesting. What actually is it? And I thought maybe it was some sort of a rite of passage. I wasn't sure what it meant. And I asked the person I was with, what does that mean, initiation? Because in English, initiation means the beginning. But he said initiation means when you think of your spiritual master as God. And I was thinking, well, that can't be true. I mean, we know he's a great man, Prabhupada, but not God. And later on, we came to learn that the representative is honored very greatly. And as Prabhupada taught us, that people often because they have a kind of blind faith in their spiritual master, it's almost like God, but not quite the same. I think one example Prabhupada used was that there was a viceroy, meaning sort of vice king or a substitute king, who would come to India on occasion. And that person would be given great gifts and great honor, not because he was deserving particularly or accepting that honor for himself, but because he was accepting it on behalf of the King of England. These are in the days when England was the ruling force over India before 1947. So every once in a while the viceroy would come and people would give him great respect because he represented their ruler of their country, the King of England. So that's kind of like what happened. And this is a very interesting a chapter about the birth of Parikshit, and later on we're going to hear about how he was saved in the womb before he was born. I don't know, is that a later chapter or is that a previous chapter? Pardon? Oh, it's the previous chapter. And what's interesting is that Aswatthama, who committed the very heinous act, unshatriya-like act of murdering sleeping children, was so elevated that he got a position of Saptarishi. He's is considered to be one of the denizens of the heavenly planets. So karma is very mysterious. We can't understand it, but someone understands. At least Krishna understands how it works. It's a very complicated thing. And as far as the constellations are concerned, Krishna, being all-powerful, can actually change the constellations. When he appeared, it's stated, I don't know the exact words, but basically he changed the phases of the moon and the stars so that when he was born it was a very auspicious time according to stellar and astrological calculations. Very, very auspicious. And as Prabhupada says, the most auspicious constellation of stars takes place during the appearance of the Lord in this material world, and is specifically called Jayanti, a word not to be abused for any other purpose. So it is a great science, and if it's not used properly, it can wreak havoc. It's very interesting that the Bhagavatam was actually was both authored and compiled. Prabhupada uses both words by Vyasadeva. But when the sages assembled to hear Sutta Goswami speak the essence of the Bhagavatam, they did so in great numbers. There were thousands of sages. And they were not ordinary people, but very learned, very astute, very highly intelligent people. And this particular sacrifice in Naimisharanya, now the area of Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh, India, Uttar Pradesh, lasted for 1,000 years. So we get very uncomfortable if a meeting lasts for more than a couple of hours. What to speak of something that lasted for 1,000 years? They were so attentive that it's recited in the Bhagavatam that one could hear a pin drop in the sand. That's how attentive they were. So it's not a simple thing. Just as it's been said by Srila Prabhupada in various writings, that especially in a letter in 1974 to Kirtananda about unity and diversity, he said that the principle of unity and diversity should be discussed every year, meaning maybe 10 years or 100 years or 200 years in Mayapur, by the leaders of ISKCON. So it's not a patent, a very easily achievable slogan, unity and diversity. Just as the Srimad Bhagavatam is not easily understood and assimilated by one person in one short meeting. These were very great sages who listened very carefully for over 1,000 years to the Bhagavatam to understand that its meaning. So it's not a simple treatise, something that can be easily assimilated or quickly assimilated. In ISKCON we have the threefold check and balance system of Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. It's something like the American government, which is a perverted reflection. They have legislative, executive, and judicial bodies, and they're meant to put checks on one another to avoid abuse by one particular branch of government. So sometimes it's very risky, because even Sanatana Goswami wrote that in the beginning, at least, in one of his writings, he said that one has to have blind faith. He used the term blind faith in the spiritual master. And that is a good thing, but as one matures in Krishna consciousness, one ceases to have blind faith and begins to see that all sadhus, or spiritual masters, are equally important. They're consistent. Not that one says one thing and another says another thing. Although it has been written by Srila Prabhupada that all philosophers have to differ with one another. That's not only, it's mainly philosophers, but then he goes on to say that a spiritual master or an acharya is in a different category. He's not a mundane philosopher, although sometimes even the acharyas differ with one another. And neophytes can find fault in their writings or teachings, that they say things that are slightly different. And so therefore there's a check and balance system. Then we can go to Krishna, we can see other sages, we can see what our spiritual master says. So there's always a system that we can follow. It's kind of like there's a risk in everything we do. There's always a risk. Just in walking down the road or in the forest, a branch of a tree can fall down and kill us. There's a risk in everything. And if you play a game, a duel with another person, one person's going to win and the other person's going to lose. So there's always a risk. There's a risk that if you take initiation, and it has happened before, the spiritual master will cease to be a Vaishnava, will fall down. There's always the risk. But if one is a little adventurous and courageous and feels that the philosophy is proper and correct, that person will take the risk of initiation, even though it for sure is a risk. Prabhupada writes in the Adi Leela, I think it's the 47th or the 48th verse in chapter 1 of Adi Leela, that the Shiksha Guru, the one who gives ordinary, daily, constant instruction, and the Diksha Guru, who gives initiation, are effectively non-different from each other and from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So as one matures in Krishna consciousness, one can take shelter of not just the Diksha Guru, but of all the Shiksha Gurus. And there are many Shiksha Gurus, the Acharyas, Prabhupada himself, and many other advanced souls. And it's happened that when a guru has fallen, people have taken shelter in other gurus, and they get a lot of enlivenment and advancement by doing that. So it's not a simple thing. It's not a simple process, taking up spiritual life. Many people think, oh, they like the vibrations, they like the hospitality, they like the singing, they like the food, they like the music. But it's in the beginning, it's all those things are there. But it's not a simple thing, as people find out later on as they mature in Krishna consciousness, that you can't just say because the vibes are good, because the food is good, because the music is wonderful, because the people are happy, that's everything. And very often we find there are seeming contradictions in philosophical points. But if one stays with the process, one can ascertain that these so-called contradictions are unreal. The idea of giving up because one's guru falls down is kind of like saying, well, if there's counterfeit money, then I'm not going to deal with money. I mean, people do, especially in the United States, they counterfeit money because they used to. I don't know if they still do, but they used to have it made of a kind of paper that was easy to copy or easy to counterfeit. And people were convicted of counterfeiting money. Even during the World War II, there was I don't know what his nationality was, that there was a prisoner of war of the Axis powers who was such a good counterfeiter that he was able to create money of almost any country, of any currency. It's quite an art. But again, if because we know there is counterfeit money, doesn't mean that real money doesn't exist. It's sort of like seeing a mirage. In the desert, there appears to be a great mirage. This is something that Prabhupada taught us about. And it looks like it's a huge body of water, but actually it's not, because it's just an illusion. But we don't think that there's not such a thing as real water. Real water does exist, just like real currency does exist, even though there is counterfeit currency. So this is the risk that everyone who is involved in a spiritual life or anything is facing. There's a risk in everything we do, even on very frontline activity. There's always the risk of falling. Whenever I give initiation, I ask the devotees. I'm starting to do it now. I used to do it. I ask them to pray that I will never fall down, because nobody and no one in this material world is perfect. And if we scrutinizingly study the Srimad Bhagavatam, even as we speak, there are people finding small but definite things that change the meaning of the book. If a comma is in the wrong place, or a full stop is in the wrong place, or a word is spelt wrong, it can change the meaning dramatically. So it's possible that in this material world, as it is said, padam padam yadvi padam natesham, there's danger at every step. So it's not that everything is wonderful and beautiful and all flowers and love. There are rasas that are based on chivalry and ghastliness. It's not all simple. So as one progresses in Krishna consciousness, these more complex divisions of rasas and interrelationships come to be known. I'll read the verse again, and then we can have some discussion if you wish. Thereupon, when all good signs of the zodiac gradually evolved, the heir apparent of Pandu, who would be exactly like him in prowess, took birth. Comments or questions or additions or comments? Yes? No? Anybody? Yes? Any hands? I'm just, wait. There's somebody, maybe. Fire away.
Just a comment on the purport that Srila Prabhupada is talking about the word Jayanti. That's referred to a glorious emperor, I think. So after that he said it's not to be construed in any material sense, because I think in India at that particular time when he wrote the purport, that people were referring to the leader of the country as Jayanti, sort of became a material term. So he just emphasised that Jayanti is a spiritual term.
As far as I know, it probably is. At least it's used as a spiritual term. Of course, I don't know. It means something like birth or beginning, but it can be, has a spiritual dimension to it. Birth and death are very significant. Like when one of the leaders was assassinated, there was a plot to murder. It actually happened like that. Yes, you had a comment or something to say?
And I was wondering about, like, when we actually get to the spiritual world, we don't come back, right?
Well, that's what the Bhagavad Gita says.
So then, is it right to assume that to go to the spiritual world, then we have surpassed that tendency to fall down?
supposedly. I mean, it does say that in Bhagavad Gita, Janma Karma Chamedya Vyan, one who understands the nature of Krishna's appearance and activities never takes birth again in this material world. So we have to have the faith that we're not going to come back. This is a constant dilemma because there always exists a material world which is 1/4 of the creation. So it seems it's reasonable to assume that there's a flow of living beings from the spiritual world to the material world that are supposedly coming back. But this is a very controversial and difficult point. Even a book was written called Even the Leaves Do Not Fall from Vaikuntha, and some devotees refuted that particular philosophy. And one of a few people refuted it. And one of the things they said in the refutation was that a fall down is not necessarily a return from the spiritual world, but a forgetfulness of our actual position. That's what causes us to stay in the material world. But even though we're originally, according to the Bhagavatam, and according to Bhagavad Gita, Krishna conscious, Nityasiddha Krishna Prema, and Chaitanya Chaitamrita, Krishna Prema Sajja Kabunai Shravanari Shuti Chitti, Karya Udai, that everyone is originally Krishna conscious. It's only through forgetfulness they are not Krishna conscious. And the Krishna consciousness movement is an awakening process, according to that verse. So yeah, it's a very complex issue, and we could probably go on discussing it for weeks and years and lifetimes, and still not be 100% sure what the conclusion would be. But it's a good point.
I have one more small question as well, if possible. I was just wondering that, so we have the mercy of our Guru and Srila Prabhupada and I was wondering, does sometimes mercy, I think, how do you use it on many people that qualify? So in some instances, is it that due to the mercy of Guru and the grace that one can...
Can you rephrase that? I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
I'm wondering, do some people get to the spiritual world by mercy as well? Is it by mercy or our endeavor?
Well, this is a question that has been discussed time and again, especially by people of other faiths. Do we attain perfection through mercy or through our own endeavor? And ultimately, it's mercy. If Krishna doesn't want us to be perfect, we won't be perfect no matter how perfectly we endeavor. And there's an English saying that says, God helps those who help themselves. So that indicates that we can't just expect the mercy of Krishna at any time or whatever we do, but it is ultimately mercy. And if we look at the time frame of the material world, I mean, we live in Kali Yuga, and we've passed approximately 5,000 to 432,000 years, and that's about less than 2%. It works out to about 1.1. I calculated once what it was. And if the Kali Yuga is supposed to be people who are 75% of the people are meant to be impious or atheistic, and 25% are meant to be theistic at the beginning. And this pretty much is the beginning. So when we approach people, we have to understand that 1 out of every 4 people, according to that calculation, would at least believe in God. So it's even though preaching is a thankless task, if that 1/4 of humanity listens attentively to what we say, then it's beneficial for them and for us. So as to whether that's the mercy of Krishna, it's all the mercy of Krishna. The fact that there are different yugas and there are different degrees of piety and theism and atheism in different ages, it's all an arrangement of Krishna. And if a person takes to Krishna consciousness, most people won't, according to what Prabhupada said, but some people do, and that is the mercy of Krishna. I mean, some people are born poor, they have a very short life, their features are not very attractive, they're uneducated and so on, but they come to Krishna consciousness and immediately they become very highly elevated devotees, to the point of even being a spiritual master. That is the mercy of Krishna manifest. And there's other people who do everything perfectly. They have great wealth, they have great physical beauty, they're very educated, they have a long life, they're very aristocratic, and yet they fail and they don't get Krishna's mercy. They don't get back to Godhead. Prabhupada tells the story of that's to this point about Narada Muni going on his way to Vaikuntha past two people. One was a very learned Brahmin, and the other was a cobbler or a shoemaker. And both of them asked him, when you see Narayan, when you go to the spiritual world, ask him, if you don't mind, ask him what my future will be. When will I be liberated? And to make a long story short, he got this. He told Narayan what was going on, and Narayan told him. And when he went back, he told both people. He said to you, to the cobbler, to the shoemaker, or soul maker, or whatever he was, that you will go back in this very next lifetime. You will be fully perfect. And he said to the Brahmin, who was a very learned scholar and a very elevated, perfect Paka Brahmin, so forth, that it would take him longer time, many lifetimes. So it really depends on the mercy of the Lord. And the rationale that the cobbler gave was that he was sitting under a banyan tree, and he says every little seed in the fig and the fruits of this banyan tree contain an entire banyan tree. So it's not amazing that you saw Narayan doing what he was doing. What was he doing? He was passing an elephant through the eye of a needle, both ways, one way and then the other way. And his justification for thinking that was wonderful was that within each little seed of the fig was an entire banyan tree. And he was commenting how wonderful the Lord is. So again, it's the mercy of the Lord that he could think that way. And this other person who was doing everything perfectly was unsuccessful in his quest for immediate liberation. Yes? Is that helpful?
So I'm going to try to understand properly, but you're saying that if a person has faith and goes back to God quicker than the other, is 100% based on mercy?
Not 100%, but mostly mercy. He doesn't want him to live, even though he's endeavoring in every possible way to do the right thing. He's got the best doctors, the best care. Still, it's up to Krishna.
So how does the karma get involved with that?
That only Krishna knows what karma is, because karma is a very complicated procedure. It's not like a law that's written down. It's different for everybody. Anyway, I wish you all the best. I'm not saying that you shouldn't endeavor. Endeavor is good, and Krishna recognizes it. But he does have the right to refuse perfection to anybody. Yes? I'm sorry, it was very blurry. I didn't hear a word of what you...
that Jayanti means victorious.
Victorious, okay. Yeah, it comes from Jaya or something. Jaya means victorious. Very good, thank you. Okay, I guess we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.